So welcome to the Maple Learning and Leading podcast. And today we're going to profile Grace Magley, Director of Digital Learning in the Natick Public Schools. Grace is a passionate educational leader who works to advance evidence-based personalized learning practices for the students of Natick and for Massachusetts. Grace is a board member for MassQ and Tech Connections Academy. Grace is the program manager for MassQ's Leadership in Blended and Digital Learning graduate program for principals and school leaders, and she leads a PLN on personalized learning for MassQ, the blendedmass.org, and acts as the advisor for the Maple Consortium. Thank you, Grace, for being here today. Very excited to kind of discuss with you your future vision for the implication of education in the age of smart machines. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me today. So I'm going to start by just talking a little bit about where this presentation came from. I spent back in November of this year, a full week out in California in Silicon Valley. I was there to speak at a EdSurge Personalized Learning Conference about the work that we're doing in my district to advance personalized learning. But while I was out there, what was really exciting was I got to visit schools that were out there that were experiential learning schools, as well as get to visit some high-tech companies like Google and Facebook, the Facebook campuses. So that trip really opened my eyes to a lot of what I already knew from the work that I was doing and reading about and the research that I had done on how we prepare students for the future. But what it opened my eyes to really was artificial intelligence and robotics, because while I was out there and on these campuses of schools and companies, I really saw firsthand these applications integrated into society, and it really made a huge impact on me. So while I was there, what I saw was driverless cars. I saw a lot of automation in the workplace. I saw robotics delivering things like resources and food to people, to employees, and even on the streets of towns in Silicon Valley, I saw robotics. So I came back thinking a lot about robotics and artificial intelligence. And the funny thing was, at the same time, my dad, who had just turned 80 years old, I called him for his birthday while I was out there, and he told me that what he received as a gift was an Alexa. He had gotten it like the week before from a friend, and he was programming it in his house, and he was telling me how much he enjoyed this, and it just kind of blew my mind, thinking about my dad, who is 80 years old, and how he now had this smart device in his home that he could talk to, and how he was actually programming it to get to know him better. So that started this whole kind of obsession with me of really thinking about this and what the implications were for for education. And at the same time, I had a niece, my first great grandniece, a cousin of mine had her first baby, Sadie, born this year. And I started to really think about Sadie, little Sadie, who's beautiful, and what her life is going to be like when she enters the workforce. So that was sort of the basis of what this presentation is all about.
And I think that's exciting for Massachusetts educators to kind of have you in a position where, you're looking at this and we're thinking about how, we already understand at this point how dramatic technology has changed the face of education. And with those experiences, with looking at the implementation of all this robotics in the future and students' future, it's exciting to kind of, have educators like yourself who are thinking so forwardly, because these times are going to be here before we know it. And with the amount of implementations of technology that we already have, it's an exciting time. We know it's coming even faster and more quickly than it's ever happened before for students.
Absolutely. So, as we know, these innovations in artificial intelligence and robotics are really just emerging now, but the predictions that I'm reading about and the research is that it is going to absolutely have this transformative effect and impact on all aspects of society. It's going to revolutionize the way we work, the way we live, and the way we play. It's going to be integrated in a way that's really hard to understand We see it on TV. I think we see it on TV, and we're starting to see it in our lives. But the thing is that it's happening so quickly that really by 2020, which is not that long, right? It's 2018. So in 2 years, we're going to see huge advances. And in 10 years, it's going to really be a totally different world. So what I say is that we've got to start asking what the implications of this technology is going to have on our schools, on our teachers, on our students, and how are we going to prepare students for this this change that's going to cause this very uncertain and unpredictable future for them. And I like to read a quote from the World Economic Forum that I think talks to the urgency that I'm trying to relay to others. And the World Economic Forum, if you haven't read much about it, is they're a worldwide organization committed to improving the state of the world. It's an international organization that's a public-private cooperation. And Klaus Schwab has a quote that says, "We stand on the brink of a technological revolution that will fundamentally alter the way we live, work, and relate to one another. In its scale, scope, and complexity, the transformation will be unlike anything humankind has experienced before." And, in more that I read, I really truly do believe this. If we think about what we're in currently, the fourth industrial revolution, and you think about the industrial revolutions that were the predecessors to this one. The first industrial revolution in 1784 was all about the use of water and steam power to mechanize production of products. And each one of these revolutions, industrial revolutions, transformed society and transformed work. What people did for livings and to make money and to advance society. So the second industrial revolution was 100 years later, and it used electric power to create the mass production assembly lines. The third, in 1980, was again another 100 years away, and that's where we saw the beginning of the information age. We saw the internet and the use of electronics to automate production. So today we're in 2018. So that's not that long ago, right? Between 1980 and 2018 is only like 40 years, where we are today in the fourth industrial revolution, which is characterized by the merging of smart technologies. And what that is doing is the Internet of Things, everything being connected, and not only connected electronically and digitally, but physically and biologically. And that is what's going to really transform the world as we know it.
It's almost as if we are now transforming as quickly as the computer chip, and we're almost moving along. We are transforming as much, what our learning is transforming is as much as the technology is demanding from us. It's really amazing.
Yeah. So, my question that I ask, is what impact is this going to have on education and learning? And I like to talk about, first off is artificial intelligence, we know, is already changing our daily lives. It's improving human health, it's improving safety, it's improving productivity, it's improving quality of life for people all around the world. Sometimes doesn't seem it, but it is if you actually look at the data. And we know there is huge potential for artificial intelligence to bring about more equity. It's going to bring about access to new jobs and tools and resources that are going to solve society's biggest global issues. But there's also, on the other side of that, great concern about this technology, and that if we don't understand it and learn to work with it and have the skills in order to continue to develop it, that the future of work is threatened for populations of people, that they may be left out of being able to work, and that threat of that widespread automation and dislocating people and jobs. So there's lots of different concerns about it. So as in education, what we want to make sure is that we prepare students. There was an article in The Atlantic that asked students what the purpose of school was. And I love this one particular quote from a 10th grade young lady who said, "The purpose of school is to help us progress as a human race, preparing us to tackle the issues that our predecessors couldn't defeat." And I really do think that that's the opportunity, and that's how we have to empower students. I always like to share a website called the Global Goals .org website, because on there the World Economic Forum has identified 17 different areas that are that make up, what these world problems are. And when you look at that website, and I think about my own district, I know the Massachusetts frameworks very much align to all of these topic areas. And as we in our schools are trying to personalize learning and to provide students with more authentic kinds of project-based learning work where they're actually problem solving and coming up with solutions, I think that that's really key, to focus on what are these solutions. How can we use technology, right? How can we use these new kinds of technologies to help us solve these big societal problems and empower our students to be able to do that? And that requires different skills.
So you really believe in districts and schools really starting to ask themselves these questions about how these technologies are going to impact, and what are the questions that we're going to face that we can address this technology with?
Yeah, I do. I really feel strongly about that. So, when we talk about the different technologies that are out there and how they are already impacting the things that I know about. So I post on my own personal Facebook page to friends, and I think I do tweet them out as well, but different technologies that I'm learning about that are actually doing this, solving these world problems. So there was one about a robotic bee that helps to pollinate plants. So imagine that. There was another about, well, we know about the different kinds of robotics that go into, places where humans can't go, right? For in war zones, but also in disaster zones, to be able to go places that humans can't, that's too dangerous for them to go into. There was some kind of a new technology invention to help clean the oceans up. So we know that we have this giant miles-long area in our ocean that is full of pollutants and plastics and all kinds of things. And they actually have a device now that they think can go in on boats and actually clean up the ocean's pollutants. So imagine that, right? Like, so these are the things that these technologies, the positive aspects of technology that they can do for society. What I also share is that from everything that I understand, while jobs are going to change, there will be different jobs for people. And it is our humanity that is going to be what is most important, our empathy and our ability to solve problems, and to be able to use technology. So these are the skills, the technology skills, but and also people, young people being able to be empathetic to other people's plights in the world and to be able to come up with solutions. So while technology is going to replace a lot of a lot of types of jobs, there will always be new jobs that are going to be available, and there's going to be jobs, people that are going to be overseeing when there's problems with the technology, right?
New
Those are the
types
kinds
of
of jobs of
jobs,
the future,
yeah.
right?
So what we're probably, what people project in terms of, jobs going away, there will be new types of jobs.
Absolutely. So they're saying, though, that the statistic that I have here, 85% of the jobs that will exist in 2030 haven't been invented yet. So think about that.
That is
So
amazing.
85% of them. So so basically what we're being told is get ready for this globalized workforce. And, part of the skills that students need to be able to have is to be resilient and be able to adapt, to be able to learn and relearn and adapt to different kinds of problems, because the change, again, is going to continue to happen exponentially.
And that changes have to happen in education as well. I mean, the workforce. We have to have an education system that matches what this workforce needs.
Right. And that's true. All businesses are dealing with the idea that their workforce has to, it's not going to be just left to colleges and K-12, but people will be trained and retrained throughout their careers. We talk about the gig economy, where people will have lots of different jobs, maybe many part-time jobs, that will, for the few that are skilled in a certain area, will they have the same type of job throughout their lifetime and career. But for most people, they're going to have to get used to this kind of a job market where they're picking up different types of jobs along the way. And for that, it takes students who are critical thinkers and problem solvers. We could say creative innovators, right? Entrepreneurial types, people who can communicate well with others using technology, and who can collaborate and are globally aware, that have those global competencies of empathy and understanding other people in different parts of the world, because they're going to be working with people from around.
All those soft skills we have trouble with now because of the introduction of technology and have to be improved. We have to learn how to work better together with the technology, working with us now. It's not, it feels like we've had gaps where everyone's been adapting for the technology for so long, and now we're really moving into a generation where it has to really be seamlessly integrated, and those are the new set of skills.
Right. So they talk about liquid skills, which is continuous learning, be able to use digital tools, being very, education as a whole has to be really aware of this disruptive innovation that's happening, because we have to be able to adapt and change. And what I would say is we have to turn more over. We have to stop structuring schooling as much as we're doing, and turn the learning over to the students and giving them much more voice and choice and student agency in their learning. So that's going to be really revolutionizing. I know there are a lot of districts in Massachusetts who are working to really change, to move towards competency-based learning. But we still have a long way to go in doing that. And my thing is, we've been talking about this for a very long time, the changes we need to make. I think we know the changes that we need to make in schools, but we have to really start working towards making them now.
I guess that's where your urgency really is so important as well. Like, if the longer we wait to look at these changes that need to be made, the further behind we're going to be. The urgency that you're sharing today really is kind of also the urgency that, and how much we need to work in education to help better develop these pathways for students, and what are the competencies we're going to be asked, because as school districts we really need to address them soon, how we're going to deal with it, what are the models that are going to work best with students. And that's what I love about this talk is, it's going to take the urgency that you're discussing and the focus on personalizing experiences for students and understanding the core set of skills that is going to be the next big step in student learning, period.
Right. Absolutely. And, I think about this in terms of when technology really started entering the schools. I felt like there was a sense of urgency at that time to be using the technology and using it well and to integrate it. But we're at another place. I know there are still districts that are still just trying to integrate technologies. But when we think about, again, the idea of these smart homes, we already are seeing smart homes, right? That I went to my son and visited my son who's newly married this year. And in his home, he had one of those smart vacuum cleaners that he actually activated using Alexa, his Alexa in his house. He had one of those doorbells on his front door that went into a monitoring system that he could see from home, from work, on his smartphone, right? Using, again, all controlled through the Alexa. His television was a smart television connected, movies and all of that. So we think about this and this idea of we're all going to have personal assistants, and how complex how well they're able, these personal assistants are going to be able to do very complex things for us in a very simple way, right? Through a simple interface. And, that's just going to keep continuing to get better and better. We already know that these smart homes, they're answering questions for children, right? Children can ask them any question that they want and they get answers. That children, they're reading bedtime stories to their children. So what impact is that going to make on the classroom? And I think about that a lot. Like if our classrooms are not going to become smart, what does that mean for a child that's born today into a smart home, and then they go to school and the schools, and they're used to having this immediate,
feedback,
and be able to answer any question. Does that make the teacher irrelevant? I don't believe that it does, but I think teachers have to really change what their focus is in actually helping students to explore what their questions are.
And the technology is definitely getting to the students so much further ahead than instructional processes. Parents are utilizing the technology with their kids younger and younger and younger. I myself, my daughter walks into her bedroom every night and she actually tells Alexa to play her Disney lullabies for her.
Right. So you experience it too in your home. I didn't know that. So right, yep. Exactly. With your little ones. Yep. My kids are all grown, so like I'm only like seeing this from the outside. But
and Alexa is a technology that gets smarter and smarter. So my kids are actually asking questions of a piece of technology that it doesn't know what to give sometimes. So I'm sure the software is just getting more and more intelligent. So as and if you enable it to do certain items, it just builds its intelligence. So it's one of those places where there really needs to be an urgency for teachers to understand how these fit into instruction, because teaching is always going to have a human component one way or another. That's my belief. But this technology is definitely driving us to kind of fill in the blanks, I feel like, also with where is instruction going.
Right. So what I know is important factors for implementing smart school technology is, that our schools, and this is what we have to think about, what are our must-dos, in all schools, right? To be able to access this in our schools and to even start being able to think about it, is that we do have to have that reliable Wi-Fi network. We have to have bandwidth. We do have to have great teacher professional development. We have to incorporate collaborative learning. We have to have appropriate student devices. That doesn't necessarily mean one-to-one, but in some cases it does, but we need to have enough, right? And appropriate student devices so that students can access technology. We have to have analytics of what's happening, and we have to be concerned about student data privacy. And there's a lot coming down the road with these personal assistants as far as all kinds of analytical software that's coming down the road, that's going to help teachers to be able to be more like coaches, that's going to allow them to be more efficient as they make this switch to facilitators of learning in the classroom.
That's amazing. I mean, this is such an exciting topic. I'm very glad you're able to kind of sit with me and do this podcast to kind of, send your message of urgency out and be able to discuss it and put out some of these major topics around the Internet of Things, security for students, what learning will look like in the future that we already know it will have. Do you have any final comments or thoughts that you'd like to add?
The only thing I joined the conversation. There's a hashtag ask about AI, and that's what I'm going to, leave us with is really, if you're not thinking about this and talking about it, start today. That's what I would like to see happen.
That's awesome. So thank you very much, Grace. I look forward to connecting with you at other Maple events and in MassQ events in the future, and I appreciate the time you spent today.
Great. Thank you, Dan.